The dinner table was always a battlefield. Not the kind with screaming or broken plates. No, it was something much worse. A cold war of indifference and quiet contempt. Melissa sat across from me, scrolling on her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Haley, our 16-year-old daughter, mimicked her mother's detached attitude perfectly. A month ago, she would at least have looked up and given me a nod when I came home. No, I was invisible. I had learned to live with it. The quiet digs, the exaggerated sighs whenever I walked into a room, the way they'd carry on conversations like I wasn't there at all. It used to be different. I used to be the man who held this family together. I worked 12-hour shifts to make sure they had everything they needed. Melissa didn't have to lift a damn finger financially. Haley went to a private school with tuition that cost more than some people's salaries. But lately, none of that mattered. I was just an ATM with legs. And that night, I finally realized I had overstayed my welcome. It started with something small. A passing comment I made about Haley's grades. "Hey, kiddo, I saw your report card came in. Want to talk about it?" She didn't even look up from her phone. No. Melissa smirked. "Jack, she's handling it. We don't need to scrutinize every little thing, do we?" I wasn't asking for a federal investigation. I was asking to be involved. But I had stopped arguing with Melissa a long time ago. "Just making sure everything's okay," I said calmly. That's when Haley scoffed and muttered under her breath, "Why don't you just disappear?" Silence. The words hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. I felt something inside me twist. My own daughter, the little girl who used to run to the door when I got home from work, who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, had just told me to disappear. Melissa didn't reprimand her. She didn't gasp in horror or tell Haley to apologize. Instead, she chuckled. Then she set her phone down, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "She's right. We'd be better off without you." I stared at her, waiting for some sign that she was joking, that this was some cruel test to see how I'd react. But no. There was no hesitation in her voice, no uncertainty in her eyes. I felt the air shift. The last bit of warmth in that house drained out like a leaking pipe. Melissa tilted her head, waiting for me to snap back. Maybe she expected me to yell, to argue, to grovel for some twisted sense of validation. Instead, I stood up. I didn't slam my chair back. I didn't say a word. I turned, walked up the stairs, and grabbed my suitcase from the closet. I wasn't thinking about where I would go. I wasn't thinking about what came next. I was just done. I packed the essentials, clothes, my laptop, my documents. No wedding photos. No sentimental trinkets. Just what I needed to walk out and never look back. I came downstairs, suitcase in hand. Melissa was still at the table, now sipping wine, as if this was a regular Tuesday night. Haley had gone back to her phone. They didn't look up as I walked to the door. Melissa's voice followed me, smooth and mocking. "Oh, come on, Jack. You're being dramatic." I didn't answer. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and let the night air hit my face. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The weight on my chest didn't lift until I was halfway down the driveway. It wasn't relief exactly. More like the realization that I had just walked away from everything I had spent years building. But what the hell was I holding on to? A house where I was a ghost. A family that had written me off before I even packed my bags. I tossed my suitcase into the trunk, got into my car, and just sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel. The porch light glowed behind me, casting long shadows across the lawn. Any second now, I expected Melissa to fling the door open, suddenly panicked, suddenly realizing what she had just done. Maybe Haley would come running after me, tears in her eyes, begging me not to go. But no one came. The house stood silent, indifferent, just like they were. I swallowed hard, turned the key, and drove away. I didn't have a plan. I had spent so many years making sure they had everything they needed that I never stopped to think about what I needed. A hotel? A rental? An old friend's couch? I had the money to go anywhere, but for the first time in my life, I had nowhere to be. I drove aimlessly, letting the darkened streets swallow me up. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, Something was unraveling. Not grief. Not sadness. Something colder. I had wasted years trying to be the good husband, the good father. I had given them stability, security, comfort. And in return, I got this? Told to disappear like I was some kind of burden? Like my existence was an inconvenience? Fine. They wanted me gone. Wish granted. I pulled into a cheap motel parking lot, killed the engine, and sat in the silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Nobody was calling to check on me. That much was certain. Probably just work emails or some automated bill notification. I booked a room, threw my suitcase onto the bed, and sat down heavily on the edge. The place smelled like old cigarettes and cheap air freshener, but at least it was quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't have to listen to Melissa's sighs of disappointment or Haley's dismissive tone. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't defeat. This was freedom. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Haley's voice like a gunshot. Why don't you just disappear? I heard Melissa's cold agreement. We'd be better off without you. Over and over, looping in my mind. Maybe I had seen the signs for years and just ignored them. The way Melissa stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. The way Haley's smiles faded when I walked into the room. I had told myself it was just a phase, that all families had rough patches. But no, this wasn't a rough patch. This was the final nail in the coffin. I stared at the ceiling until the sky outside turned gray. Then, just as I was about to drift off, my phone exploded with notifications. The screen lit up with missed calls, 45 and counting. Melissa, Haley, even her mother. Something was wrong. I stared at the phone, letting it vibrate in my hand. A slow, cold smirk curled at the corner of my lips. Oh, now you need me? I let the phone ring, and ring, and ring. Melissa's name flashed on the screen over and over, followed by Haley's, then her mother's, then back to Melissa. 45 missed calls and counting. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned back against the headboard of the cheap motel bed, tossing my phone onto the nightstand like it was just another meaningless piece of junk. A day ago, I would have picked up on the first ring, heart pounding, ready to fix whatever problem had landed in my lap. But that was the old Jack. The Jack who bent over backward to make sure everyone was comfortable, even when he was suffocating. The Jack who was treated like a piece of furniture in his own home. That Jack was gone. I took my time getting out of bed, stretching as the motel's weak heating system rattled in the background. I wasn't in a hurry. Whatever crisis had suddenly turned me from expendable to essential could wait. The calls didn't stop. Another 10, then 15. Then a text from Melissa finally came through. Jack, we need to talk. Pick up. It's an emergency. Emergency? Funny how last night, I was disposable. Nothing more than a nuisance they were eager to shove out the door. And now, not even 12 hours later, I was apparently the most important person in the world. I took my time getting ready, throwing on some fresh clothes and splashing cold water on my face. I felt lighter, like I had been carrying an anvil on my back for years and had finally set it down. By the time I grabbed my phone again, the messages were piling up. Melissa, Jack. Please. It's serious. Haley. Dad, where are you? Please answer. Melissa's mother. Jack, for God's sake, stop acting like a child and call Melissa back. Haley is in trouble. Haley is in trouble. I sat down, staring at the words. That was the one thing they knew would get to me. I could ignore Melissa. I could ignore her mother. But Haley? My little girl, no matter how much she had changed, was still my daughter. And no matter what she had said to me last night, if she was really in trouble, I needed to know. I sighed, picked up my phone, and dialed Melissa's number. She picked up on the first ring. Jack, what happened? I cut in, my voice steady, cold. She exhaled sharply, like she hadn't expected me to be so direct. It's Haley, she said. She got into a fight at school. A bad one. A fight? That didn't sound like Haley. She might be suspended. Or expelled. I don't know yet. The school called this morning, and they need both parents to come in. I let the word sit for a moment. Both parents. I wasn't her father when they were kicking me out of the house last night. But now, when there were consequences, when things weren't going smoothly, now I was her father again. Melissa must have sensed my hesitation because her voice sharpened. Jack, this is serious. We can't just ignore this. I cut in, laughing dryly. We don't exist anymore, Melissa. Remember? You and Haley made that pretty damn clear last night. A pause. That was a mistake, she said, her tone softer now, calculated. We were angry. Things were said. But right now, we need to focus on Haley. We. Like I was still supposed to play my part in the family I wasn't even a part of anymore. I glanced at myself in the motel mirror, at the man I had become in just one night. A man who wasn't a doormat anymore. A man who didn't jump the second they snapped their fingers. I had two choices. I could get dressed, drive to the school, and pretend like nothing had changed, like I was still the guy they could summon whenever things went south. Or I could let them deal with the mess they created. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then, finally, I said, good luck handling it. And I hung up. The second I hung up, my phone started buzzing again. Melissa. Then Haley. Then Melissa again. I let it ring. I tossed the phone onto the bed and just listened to the sound of them panicking. It was almost surreal. Just yesterday, I was nothing. A nuisance. A problem they wished would disappear. Now, they couldn't stop calling. I sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing my hands together. The old me would have already been halfway to the school by now, suit jacket on, prepared to smooth things over with the principal, make some calls, and fix it like I always did. But something had shifted. They didn't want me. Well, now they were going to learn what that actually meant. I picked up the remote, flipped on the TV, and cranked up the volume just enough to drown out the vibrating phone. I wasn't about to drop everything just because they suddenly realized my value. No, they were going to feel this absence. For years, I had been treated like a resource, just another bill payer, chauffeur, problem solver. Never a husband, never a father, just someone expected to provide and shut up. And now, when the house of cards started to collapse, they were scrambling. Not my problem anymore. I showered, ate a vending machine breakfast, took my time, and by the time I finally grabbed my phone again, the calls had slowed. Now, it was mostly texts. Melissa, Jack, answer the phone. Melissa, you're being ridiculous. Melissa, do you even care what happens to your daughter? Oh, that was good. I smirked. Now I was the one who didn't care? After everything? I scrolled down. Haley, Dad, please. Just come to the school. Haley, I didn't mean what I said last night. Just please come. I stopped. She didn't mean it. The same girl who had looked me dead in the eye and told me to disappear? Who sat there while her mother agreed, without even flinching. And now, she didn't mean it? I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to convince myself that it was just a stupid, impulsive teenage moment. That Melissa had poisoned her against me, and maybe, just maybe, she was realizing how wrong she was. But I knew better. I wasn't about to come running because they finally figured out what life was like without me cleaning up their messes. I typed back one simple message. You told me to disappear. So I did. Then I turned off my phone. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, I wasn't available. No buzzing phone. No panicked texts. No guilt-tripping voicemails. Just peace. I stretched out on the stiff motel bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality of it all sink in. I was free. For the first time in decades, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I didn't have to beg for respect that should have been mine by default. They wanted me gone. Well, now they had to live with it. I didn't check the time, didn't check my phone. I just sat there, absorbing the weight of my own decision. It wasn't regret, not even close. If anything, it felt satisfying. Because for once, I wasn't cleaning up their mess. An hour passed, maybe two. And then, finally, I caved. I powered the phone back on, just out of curiosity. The notifications came flooding in. Melissa, you are being unbelievable right now. Melissa, This is our daughter, Jack. Not just mine. Melissa, if you don't come, I swear to God. I smirked. Threats. That was new. I scrolled down. Haley, Dad, I'm sorry. Please just come to the school. Haley, I messed up. I just need you right now. Haley, Mom's freaking out. Please. I paused. Something about Haley's messages felt different. Not manipulative like Melissa's. Not laced with entitlement. Desperate. I wasn't made of stone. No matter how badly she had treated me, she was still my daughter. And no matter how much I hated how she had changed, part of me still remembered the little girl who used to wait for me at the door, arms outstretched, beaming when I came home. The girl who once loved me. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my face. This wasn't about Melissa anymore. I grabbed my jacket, shoved my phone in my pocket, and headed out the door. I wasn't doing this for my wife. I wasn't even doing it for the school. I was doing it to look my daughter in the eyes and see for myself. Was she really sorry? Or was this just another game? The school parking lot was packed when I pulled in. Parents, teachers, students, it was chaos. Something big had happened. I parked near the entrance and just sat there for a moment, watching. Kids in uniforms stood around whispering, their eyes darting toward the front doors like something out of a damn courtroom drama. I saw a couple of parents talking in hushed voices, shaking their heads. Whatever Haley had done, it wasn't some minor she talked back to a teacher incident. This was serious. I stepped out of the car, walking toward the entrance, my jaw clenched. A part of me was bracing for whatever story I was about to hear. Another part of me was wondering if this was just a setup, if Melissa was going to be waiting inside, arms crossed, expecting me to apologize for not coming sooner. I pushed open the doors, and there she was. Melissa stood near the office, pacing back and forth, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She looked up the second she heard the door swing open. For the first time in years, I saw something in her face that wasn't arrogance. It was panic. Jack. Her voice was tight, breathless. I didn't answer. I walked past her, heading straight for the receptionist's desk. The woman behind the counter barely looked up before saying, "Mr. Carter?" I nodded. She gestured toward the hallway. "Principal Reynolds is waiting inside. Your daughter is in there." I turned to go. Melissa grabbed my arm. I stopped, slowly looking down at her hand gripping my sleeve. She hesitated, like she was realizing she no longer had the same hold on me she once did. Then she sighed, her voice quieter now. "Jack, just don't make things worse." I nearly laughed. Me? I pulled my arm free and walked into the office. Haley was sitting in a chair, her face pale, her hands clenched in her lap. She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I didn't see that usual teenage bravado. No eye rolls. No crossed arms. Just fear. The principal, a stern-looking woman in a gray blazer, folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. Please, sit." I didn't sit. I didn't take my eyes off Haley. What happened? My voice was low, steady. Haley swallowed. She looked like she wanted to disappear. The principal cleared her throat. "Your daughter was involved in an altercation this morning. A physical altercation." I raised an eyebrow. "Haley." I turned back to her. "You got into a fight?" Silence. Then, finally, she nodded. The principal sighed. "It was bad, Mr. Carter. Another student ended up in the nurse's office. We're lucky it wasn't worse." I clenched my jaw. "Who?" Haley opened her mouth. Closed it. The principal hesitated. It was a boy from her grade. Ethan Holloway. I frowned. Why does that name sound familiar? Melissa's voice came from behind me, her tone laced with frustration. "Because that's the boy she's been seeing." I turned back to Haley so fast she flinched. "The boy you're dating?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I exhaled, trying to process. "And you just decided to fight him? In the middle of the school?" That's when Haley's hands balled into fists. Her jaw clenched. And for the first time since I walked in, I saw something other than fear in her face. I saw rage. "He deserved it," she whispered. The principal sighed. "Mr. Carter, your daughter, she didn't just fight Ethan. She broke his nose. The air in the room shifted. Melissa made a strangled noise behind me. Oh my God. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice calm. Haley. She finally looked at me. What did you do? I asked. And that's when her eyes filled with tears. The room was silent. Melissa was stiff behind me, arms crossed, so tight it looked like she was holding herself together by sheer force. The principal waited, lips pressed in a thin line. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Haley. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I saw my daughter again. Not the cold, dismissive girl who had told me to disappear. Not the spoiled, entitled teenager who mimicked her mother's contempt. Just a scared kid, barely holding herself together. Her bottom lip trembled. She sucked in a sharp breath, trying to compose herself, but it was no use. The tears spilled over. I felt something tighten in my chest. Haley, I said softly. What did he do? Her hands clawed at the hem of her sweater. She stopped, inhaling sharply. Then she swallowed hard and forced the words out. He was showing people. She choked on it. Looked away. I froze. Oh no. No. A sickening feeling curled in my gut. The principal cleared her throat. There were photos, Mr. Carter, of Haley. Personal ones. He was showing them around to his friends. Photos. The words slammed into me like a brick. Melissa gasped. My entire body went rigid. Every inch of me locked up, muscles tensing like a loaded spring. Haley let out a quiet, humiliated sob, and something inside me snapped. I turned to the principal, my voice low and lethal. Where is he? She flinched slightly. Mr. Carter. Where, I repeated, is he? Melissa grabbed my arm, voice frantic. Jack, don't. I shook her off so hard she stumbled back. The principal quickly held up a hand. Mr. Carter, please. The school is handling it. The authorities have been contacted. The authorities? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. The authorities? You think I give a damn about? Dad, Haley's voice cracked. I stopped. She was staring at me, wide-eyed, breathing hard. For the first time, I saw fear in her face. Not of Ethan, not of the situation, of me. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt, fighting against every primal, burning instinct to destroy that kid with my bare hands. I took a slow, shaky breath, then another, and another. The principal relaxed slightly. Melissa didn't. She looked like she'd seen a stranger, like she hadn't realized what kind of man she had been pushing away all these years. I turned back to Haley. I pulled a chair up and sat right in front of her, my voice steady. We're going to fix this, I told her. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what we have to do. But I swear to you, Haley. I leaned in. This will never happen to you again. A sob ripped from her chest. And for the first time since she was a little girl, she threw herself into my arms. Haley clung to me like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. Her shoulders shook with quiet, gasping sobs, and I felt every single one of them in my chest like a hammer. This wasn't the same girl who had told me to disappear. This was my daughter, my real daughter, the one I hadn't seen in years. The one who had been swallowed up by Melissa's bitterness, by teenage arrogance, by whatever poisonous influence had twisted her against me. And now, with her walls crumbling, she had no one else to turn to but me. Melissa stood frozen behind us. For the first time since I met her, she had nothing to say. No sarcastic remark. No cold dismissal. Just silence. Good. Because right now, I didn't give a damn about her. I ran a hand down Haley's back, slow and steady. It's okay, I murmured. You're okay. She just shook her head against my chest. I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know he. Her words broke apart in a fresh wave of sobs. I knew. She thought she was in control. She thought this boy cared about her. And then he did what boys like him always do. Used her, humiliated her, destroyed her trust in a way she would never forget. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing the fury down. Killing the kid wasn't an option. But ruining him? Oh, that could be arranged. I glanced up at the principal. What happens next? She hesitated. The school has a strict policy. He will be suspended, And if the authorities find enough evidence. If. I cut in sharply. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It's complicated, Mr. Carter. No, I said, my voice ice cold. It's really not. This wasn't complicated. This wasn't gray. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Some little punk thought he could take advantage of my daughter. Thought he could get away with it. He was about to find out how wrong he was. I turned back to Haley, tilting her chin up so she had to look at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy from crying. This doesn't define you, I told her quietly. Do you understand me? She sniffled, barely nodding. I squeezed her hand. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not small. And we are going to handle this. Together. Her fingers tightened around mine. And for the first time in a long, long time, she looked at me like her father again. I stood up, my movements slow and controlled. Then I turned to Melissa. She blinked, like she wasn't sure what the hell just happened. Like she was just now realizing that the man she had spent years belittling, the man she had pushed to the side, the man she had told to disappear, was the only one holding this family together. I met her stunned gaze and spoke calmly, deliberately. You're going to take Haley home. She frowned, confused. But where are you? I said, pulling out my phone. I'm going to make sure that little bastard regrets ever even looking at my daughter. And then I walked out of the office. I stepped into the hallway, phone in hand. My mind already working 3 steps ahead. The school could handle it? Please. I knew how these things worked. Some administrator would talk to Ethan's parents, slap him on the wrist, and sweep it under the rug before it could turn into a PR nightmare. Not happening. I wasn't some clueless dad who would sit back and trust the system to handle this. I was a man who built things for a living, and I sure as hell knew how to tear them down when they were built wrong. And right now, I was going to tear Ethan Holloway's entire life apart. I scrolled through my contacts, finding exactly who I needed. The line rang twice before a voice answered. Jack? It was Andrew, my old college buddy. Damn, haven't heard from you in a while. What's up? I need a favor, I said, my voice steady. A big one. Andrew didn't hesitate. What kind of favor? Andrew was a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a damn good one. The kind that won. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone measured. There's a kid. Ethan Holloway. He took. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. He took personal photos of Haley. Shared them. She found out, and now the school is talking suspensions like that's enough. Andrew went quiet. Then his voice came back, sharp as a knife. What do you need me to do? I felt something dark settle inside me. Destroy him. Andrew didn't ask questions. He didn't try to soften it, didn't try to talk me down. He knew me well enough to know that if I was calling him, if I was this calm, this controlled, it meant war. I'll start digging, he said immediately. Parents? Money. Old money, I muttered, pacing the hallway. Daddy's a CEO. Mommy sits on a couple of charity boards. Probably used to buying their son out of trouble. Andrew let out a low chuckle. Oh, this is going to be fun. I didn't smile. I wasn't in the mood for fun. I was in the mood for ruin. I want him expelled, I said. I want charges filed. I want his college acceptances revoked. I want his parents scrambling to cover their asses while their son becomes a social pariah. Andrew let out a slow breath. You sure about this, Jack? Dead sure. There was no hesitation in my voice. No second guessing. Because Haley might have been too blind to see me as her father before, might have fallen for Melissa's manipulations, might have treated me like a disposable piece of her life. But she was still my daughter. And no one, hurt my daughter and walked away untouched. Andrew whistled low. All right, then. Let's make this kid's life hell. I hung up, and as I slid my phone back into my pocket, I felt something shift inside me. Last night, I had left that house a broken man. A man who had spent years being dismissed, ignored, treated like an afterthought. But now? Now, I was something else entirely. Melissa and Haley wanted to see what life was like without me. They were about to learn that when I walked away. I took all the protection with me. I walked out of that school with my head high and my hands steady. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not the quiet, patient man who tolerated disrespect in his own home. Not the doormat who let his wife's smug arrogance and his daughter's teenage rebellion chip away at his dignity. No, that version of me was gone. The man who stepped out of that office was someone who wasn't going to be ignored anymore. I climbed into my car, gripping the wheel as the engine roared to life. My pulse was steady. My mind was razor sharp. Andrew had already texted me back. Andrew, kids got priors. Andrew, not legal ones, but trouble. Fights. Vandalism. Daddy made it all go away. Andrew, not this time. A slow, cold smile curled at the corner of my lips. This wasn't just about Haley anymore. This kid was a repeat offender, and his rich parents had bought his way out of consequences every time. Not today. I pulled out of the parking lot, dialing my next call. It rang twice before a voice answered. Jack? It was my boss, Mark. Need another favor, I said. Mark chuckled. That's 2 in 1 year. I should start charging you. I didn't laugh. I need the Holloways blacklisted, I said smoothly. All of them. Silence. Then, a low whistle. Jesus, Jack. That's heavy. Can you do it? Mark exhaled. Yeah. We work with some of their associates. A couple of silent partnerships. I can start whispering in the right ears. By the end of the month, they'll be locked out of some big contracts. Do it. Mark hesitated. You sure about this? I looked out at the road ahead, the sun glaring down over the city. Ethan Holloway had humiliated my daughter, had put her in a position where she was afraid to show her face at school, and his parents had probably patted his head and told him not to do it again. I clenched my jaw. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Mark didn't question it again. Consider it done. I hung up. Melissa and Haley thought they didn't need me. Thought I was just some background character in their lives, someone who could be discarded and replaced. But they were about to learn something the hard way. I wasn't just some guy. I was the damn foundation they had been standing on this entire time. And now? Now they were going to see what happened when that foundation disappeared. I drove in silence, the weight of everything settling over me like a calm before the storm. Melissa and Haley thought I had been some passive presence in their lives, someone who would always be there, always ready to absorb their cruelty, always willing to fix what they broke. But I was done. Done being ignored. Done being used. Done being disposable. By the time I pulled into the motel parking lot, my phone was blowing up again. Melissa. Then Haley. Then Melissa again. I let it ring. Then I saw the message. Haley, Dad, I'm scared. Please answer. I stared at the words, my grip tightening around the phone. Scared? I exhaled slowly. Whatever had happened at school, whatever Ethan's retaliation was, Haley was finally realizing that Melissa couldn't protect her. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and just let the silence fill the space. They had wanted me gone. Well, they got what they wanted. Now they were drowning without me. After a long moment, I picked up my phone and sent one message back. You told me to disappear, Haley. I did. I hovered over the send button. Paused. Then, at the last second, I added, now you know what that really means. Then I hit send and turned off my phone. The man I used to be, the man they thought they could treat like garbage and still keep around, was never coming back.